Greetings, my name is Neosekken, and welcome back to my Let's Play of Crimson Grey, Dusk and Dawn. In the last episode, we began our new tale with Lizzie and John from the last game, basically working towards getting their college degrees to get them to create the lives that they want to create for themselves. But, well, with us controlling Lizzie in particular, we know that all is not well inside the paradise that is her lovely state of mind. Far from it, actually. It's so much so to where it's practically been nothing but a struggle for her to freaking restrain herself, so she doesn't end up causing problems for herself and John, especially John. In other news, some kind of politician that's railing against big pharmaceutical companies. I think her name is Francesca Kesley, is coming to their college campus here to speak on the matters that she's campaigning against. And, well, Lizzie is worried that since one of this Francesca's opponents is Koitek, with them being a large pharmaceutical company of their own, she's going to draw negative attention from Koitek over to the campus and end up causing an incident over here, especially if they find out that, you know, Lizzie and John also happen to be here, even though they haven't made any move against them for the past couple years. So, yeah. Currently, the biggest threat I'm worried about at the moment is just Lizzie flying off the handle and just going on a murder spree at this point. Then, I don't know, Koitek making a surprise appearance. And hopefully we can keep the body count to a minimum, but I'm not feeling too terribly optimistic about that. Especially, again, considering what we had to go through with the last game. But time will tell what will happen. Anyway, let's just go ahead and continue our grassroots activism. When her schedule went unusually well, Lizzie found herself actually somewhat troubled. She had no reading for classes, the shopping had gone quickly, and nothing had slowed her down. That meant that she had a surprising amount of extra time. On the one night, John needed to work late at the library. For a little while, she busied herself tying up the house and cleaning her knives, but she found herself anxious. It was no serious premonition, just an uncomfortable feeling. Honestly, this music is just making this situation probably feel a bit more tense than it actually is. Or maybe it's exactly the right kind of music, and it's perfectly as intense as the music implies. And honestly, I think both ideas are perfectly valid given it's Lizzie we're dealing with here. She was glad to have him in her mind, and she was sure that she would find his song again, but she also wanted him in the flesh. She spent a while writing in her notebook, many of its pages now heavy with ink. Mostly plans for worst case scenarios. If something happened during Francesca's visit, and she needed to protect John. But that couldn't hold her attention for long. This was a bad night to be home alone. After chewing on one knuckle for a while, Lizzie decided that she should just go visit John at the library. She padded across campus, noting how different it was at night. Looks prettier at night. The normal dorms were still bright and would become progressively louder as the students started to party. A few were ambling further, likely drunk or stoned. They had been invited a time or two, but for the most part she and John didn't have connections to those crowds. Being together and off campus, even just slightly off campus, set them apart from the other students. Normally, Lizzie never gave the subject a second thought. Now she found herself resenting their happiness. All of them wasting their time so carelessly while he was working, alone and probably depressed. If she urged him to take fewer shifts, he would. Lizzie knew that, but as much as she wanted more of him, She didn't want to unfairly force him to do that. If John thought the extra work was necessary, then he was probably right. Still, Lizzie's eyes briefly flickered to a couple sprawled over one another in the grass. Neither a threat. They were pulling at their clothes, though, and well past the point of just making out. Before they finished college, she wanted a moment like that. Not doing something like that in public, but simply being together by the trees, enjoying themselves. College should be a time of happy memories, light years between the drama of their meeting and the difficulties of adulthood. She wanted something she could remember forever, maybe capture in a picture. Yet right now everything was so complicated. Only because you're making it. Lizzie frowned and looked away, increasing her pace. It wasn't fair. The library itself was basically deserted, since a few were doing research on a Friday night. That was why John ended up with a long shift, and why he took it, getting paid to do his own work. Lizzie found herself shifting to walk silently instead of giving any sign of her presence. This could be a good opportunity to observe him without him being aware. It had been the first way she could come to love him. And though the other ways since coming to know him were better, watching still held a special place in her heart. She peered around a bookshelf and finally spotted him. John sat behind the desk, reading from one of his books. He was making decent progress, brow furrowed in that concentrated look that she so loved. But occasionally his focus seemed to waver. She noticed his eyes grow a little distant, and had to backtrack on the page. Sometimes when he did, he'd look at a sheet of paper beside him for a while, occasionally make a note. Were they just his notes? But she knew John's note-taking habits extremely well, and that wasn't how he usually operated. It was as if he was trying to read, but simultaneously distracted by thoughts of something else. Trouble in paradise, John? What could it possibly be? Her mind imagined that it was some kind of love letter, but she discarded that possibility as quickly as she could. No, John wouldn't do that. He wrote a love letter. If he wrote a love letter, it would be to her. He looked so sad, though. Lizzie stared as if her gaze could strip away his skull and reveal every thought inside. If she just understood him perfectly, she could prevent him from being sad. There would be no anxiety then, only perfect trust for one another. Lizzie retreated further in the library, just in case he looked up in her direction, and watched him from a vantage point even he wouldn't notice. He did glance up a few times, almost as if he felt her watching, but she was too well hidden. It was wonderful that he could almost sense her, but Lizzie needed to watch him for now. Eventually she would understand. Hours passed in a flash, and suddenly John was standing and yawning. After so long of his stillness, it was almost startling. Apparently his shift was almost over, which meant he would need to lock up. Deciding that she had watched enough, Lizzie sneaked through the back stacks and approached from near the entrance again, beaming. John smiled the instant he saw her. "Oh, Lizzie, I hope you weren't lonely. I just wanted to come greet you once your shift was over. You're a sight for sore eyes after this dead shift. Just give me a moment to lock up." It didn't take him long, and then they were walking across the campus to head back home. Her arm through his, and her head leaning against his shoulder. They passed the couple, now lying still on top of one another. John seemed a little surprised, but just shook his head. Lizzie inclined her head toward them, then looked back at him and raised her eyebrows. Sorry, I can barely keep my eyes open. That's okay. I know you've studied hard. Let me help you rest. When they got home, she quickly took his bag from him to put it away before he could go to the trouble. If she acted quickly enough, he would need to use any more energy to make decisions and could just relax. Eventually, he fell asleep with his head on her lap, finally looking truly at peace. Lizzie stroked his hair and stared down at him, watching. Life proceeded normally enough. A significant part of campus was busy preparing for the arrival, but there were even more people who didn't know or didn't care. But it mattered to John, so it mattered to Lizzie. Lizzie had joined him in spending time with the preparations, and it had seemed to go well. She was glad to see John invested in something like this. But when she came home from class one day, she realized that she might have gotten it entirely wrong. John slumped on the couch, too unfocused to notice her. There was an emptiness in his eyes she hadn't seen in some time, even making her heart hammer in her chest. Feeling the depression coming back, my man? John? Are you okay? Is something wrong? I'm just a little tired. There's not a problem or anything. Oh, come on, even I can tell that's bullshit. Of course there's a problem if you're not feeling okay. You don't have to pretend to smile for me, John. It's okay to be sad sometimes. Thank you, Lizzie. It's nothing specific. I'm just having a bad day. Go on. Then stay right here and don't worry about anything. She skipped closer and gave him a quick hug and kiss, but didn't try to press. Instead, she moved on into the kitchen, getting something simmering. When John was depressed, he didn't want to eat. She had learned that trying to force it could turn bad, but the smell would slowly get through to him. While doing her work, Lizzie headed into their bathroom and counted his depression medication. It didn't seem like he had forgotten, or that he had taken more than usual, which was good. But though his medication helped, it couldn't make his life perfect. There had been a time when she had desperately hoped that she could do that. Still wished that she could, but knew that his sadness didn't mean that he didn't love her. All she could do was be supportive. When she came back out, he had slumped back further, but she saw a bit more relaxation in his posture. Suddenly her heart ached with love for him so intense that she had to support herself on the doorframe. She didn't observe him. He was always so supportive, so kind, even when it cost him. It was easy to just bask in his presence, to see him as a shining paragon. But her John was human, had limited resources. If she had missed the signs as she sometimes did. One of Lizzie's fingers slid up to her mouth and she started to bite down on it, but she had pulled back. John wouldn't want her to do that. Instead, she moved into the room, determined to get back this time. She checked on the soup, then went to sit beside him. Why can't I read properly today? Just touching his side a little, being present without demanding anything of him. John smiled at her, but didn't say anything. It was a quiet smile that faded into sadness, but she loved it too. These incidents always magnified her love for him. She didn't love his depression, but when he was like this, he seemed so truly real that she couldn't take her eyes off him. Lizzie restrained herself and just sat supportively. After a time, though, she shifted. Later on, maybe they could eat. But until then, do you need to talk about anything? I'll be okay. I think I just overextended myself preparing for Kesley's visit. Oh. I haven't been pushing you too much, have I? I liked when we worked together before, so... No, I didn't mean that at all. There's just so much to do. But you don't have to do it all, remember? Don't push too hard. You're right. Thanks, Lizzie. Lizzie thought that their conversation had gone well, but she was plagued by doubt. She had noticed this depression incoming, had been able to prevent it. She began going over every interaction in minute detail, wondering where she had neglected something. Lizzie realized that she needed to get out of her head. If she let herself keep thinking that way, she would end up spending the evening developing elaborate plans to kill someone or kidnap John to safety. Yeah, we wouldn't want either of those. We've already gone through enough of that in the first game. She needed to do something, but what? Let's talk about issues. Lizzie wanted to be supportive, but she knew she couldn't help him if she let herself grow unstable. So she hesitantly began to talk, letting him know about her insecurities. No, John didn't have much energy to spare. He did his best to listen. But as things went on, Lizzie began to tell he was growing more depressed. She wished she'd decided differently, but it was too late. They stopped talking after a while and just held each other on the couch, drifting closer to sleep as exhaustion claimed them. Maybe I should try keeping some of this crap to myself, just in case it's all my letting Lizzie's feelings become known to him, all her insecurities just drains him too much or something. I don't know. As she fell asleep, Lizzie settled on another thought. This visit might be a good thing, but she'd be very glad when it was over. When the day finally came, it wasn't as grand as all the build-up had led Lizzie to expect. It was just another speaker coming to campus after all. And as one of the better universities in the region, they got plenty of speakers. The growing power of pharmaceuticals was a somewhat hot topic, but it was hardly a source of celebrity. Her expectations had been tempered by John's attitude, though. Aaron and some of the other organizers were exhilarated, as if a visit from a guest speaker would change everything. But as usual, he was more reserved. It was one of the things that made his love for her so special, and she loved it as part of him. The low-key nature to the entire thing did a lot to calm her anxiety, though Lizzie had filled many pages of her notebook with plans in the event of an attack. But given that this was one step on a long speaking tour, it seemed less likely that Koitek would actually try anything. The more you keep saying the more that you keep saying that something is less likely to happen, you'll just probably end up jinxing it and make something happen anyway. Just stop thinking about it. They were headed out to attend soon, and though it was going to be as casual as most events on campus, Lizzie had dressed up a little out of habit. She lingered by the cabinet, trying to select which weapons to take along with her. The problem was that she had room for so few. Her axe, of course, but the knives were always a problem. Ready to go, Lizzie? Almost, John. Just let me pick a knife and I'll be with you. He leaned against the nearby wall, watching her thoughtfully as she chose. After a moment, he spoke slowly. I'm just wondering, would you be happy if Kesley managed to destroy Koitek somehow? Of course. It's a terrible company. It gave you that awful drug and tried to take us apart. But she isn't going to destroy it, just regulate it. Maybe things would get better, but I want revenge. I meant destroy in a metaphorical sense. dismantling the corporation. You're more thinking leveling it to the ground. Blood and flames! Lizzie answered happily and finally picked a slender knife. A good balance of range, heavy enough to be durable, but thin enough to augment her axe with stabbing potential. She set it into its place and turned to him. But I don't mind things like this. Anything that works against them is good. And though I don't want you to hurt yourself, I'm happy that you care about this so much. But if there was some way to leave them intact to ensure they never bothered us again, I'd take it, of course. You're the most important thing. She leaned forward to give him a kiss, letting this one linger. It might be their last until the serious event was over, so she wanted to enjoy it. Not as she minded waiting. It made the next kiss when they came together again all the sweeter. I just wanted to say that you're the most important thing to me too. Sorry if I seem preoccupied by all this. Oh no, it's fine. I like to see you focus on things you love. Well, I don't take you for granted. I hope I never do. I hope you never do either. Aw, John. If you keep talking like that, we won't make it to the event. He chuckled and offered her his arm, which she gladly accepted. They headed out to the hall to hear the speech. Achievement unlocked, Mrs. Kesley. They arrived and found the hall surprisingly full. Almost enough to make her wish they'd arrived earlier, but it would be fine. Aaron waved it to them from near the front, but those seats were already full, so they took ones near the back. It's good to see our work wasn't wasted, at least. Lots of people seem interested. Lots of people from the community, too. Doesn't surprise me. Koitek may not have any direct presence here, but they manufacture so many drugs, people have to know about them. Lizzie reached out to hold his hand while they waited for things to get started. He took it and chatted casually with her until it was finally time. After some awkward testing of the mic and a squeal of feedback, the dean managed to quiet people down. Though he gave an instruction to Francesca Kesley, Lizzie wasn't able to focus on it. She already knew the information. It was essentially just a formality anyway. More importantly, Lizzie looked for the woman herself and found her seated near the front. She looked like her pictures. Nothing out of the ordinary, but Lizzie shifted her gaze between her and the exits just to be sure. When Francesca Kesley took the stage, Lizzie surreptitiously shot a glance at John. But she had been wrong to worry. He had shifted his purely focused mode, interested only in what she had to say. On my first day of work at the FDCA, my supervisor said I should look for another job, because the organization wouldn't be needed for long. She was a good speaker, though her speech had the feeling of one that had been repeated a huge number of times. It had an air of authenticity, but it was a practiced authenticity. Lizzie could only focus on it in the background anyway. While listening idly, Lizzie came to a realization. And what would that be? Something she had never said to John. Probably something she should discuss with him. She squirmed a little in her seat, wondering what thoughts he might have about it, but she couldn't interrupt. Now I'm really curious. Some people might have said that Koitek created her, with their ill-advised experiment when Abby was pregnant. Lizzie had never felt that way, until now had not reflected on the fact. Now she understood why. The experiment might have made her different from other girls, but Lizzie didn't care about that. What mattered to her was the person she was now, shaped by her years growing up. And most importantly, shaped by John. Her world had felt so hollow and empty. And then, when she had found him, she had been monomaniacal in her focus on him. But he had opened up a new world of possibilities for her. Unable to contain herself, Lizzie leaned over and kissed John on the cheek. He blinked in surprise and then smiled at her, resting her head against his shoulder. Lizzie let her focus drift back to his speech for a moment. The capital he's and hims just keep messing me up here, and commas are a little hard for me to tell apart from the periods, so it just seems like as though she's just stopping mid-sentence to me half the time. The industry's lobbyists would have you believe that their self-regulation has been and will continue to be effective. The primary example that is always brought up is how thalidomide was kept out of the United States, and so many children were spared birth defects. But as I demonstrate thoroughly in my book, this is more of a quirk of fate than self-regulation. And that thin layer of defense will not be remotely adequate given the massive increase in research and development we've seen over the past 2 decades. Most notably, many of the newest drugs being produced treat conditions that are fundamentally subjective. Their consequences, if any, will take years to emerge and may not always be as clearly defined as birth defects. Make no mistake, there are people alive today bearing the scars of this unchecked research. Sooner or later, they will come forward. Lizzie sat tensely, deciding to hold in her concerns over that development. But John had already considered that. He squeezed her hand and bent closer to whisper to her, "Are you all right? John, would you want me to step forward and do that?" "No." His answer came immediately. Lizzie was a little surprised, and John seemed to have taken himself aback, but a moment later he smiled. "No, you matter more to me than all of this. Anyone who stepped forward would be surrounded by a horrible amount of controversy. I want you here with me." Her smile widened, and Lizzie leaned in to kiss him, tears in her eyes. She had so many things she wanted to say to him, but some people around them were merely glaring at their whispering. When the two of them kissed, most of the glares rolled their eyes and turned away. The speech ended with Francesca's usual conclusion. The FCDA was toothless compared to the pharmaceutical giants, and the world needed a far more comprehensive set of regulations. Part of Lizzie's mind acknowledged that as true, but it seemed a very distant and clinical thought compared to the warmth inside of her. "I don't know, man. I mean, having some regulations is better than none at all here, but just how many regulations exactly are you hoping to get here? That's what I want to know. Because there is such a thing as over-regulation." After the speech, the floor was open to questions, which drew their attention away from each other. This was the part John was most interested in, after all, and Lizzie agreed with him that they were more likely to hear new information during that part. The first person to get the mic asked a boring, generic question about what students could do in the face of giant companies. She also had a flirtatious walk, so Lizzie scowled at her for both reasons. Soon, though, Aaron was at the mic to ask his question. "You covered the potential impact on the United States as well, but only spoke in vague terms about the need for international regulations. What impact do you expect the rise of pharmaceutical giants to have on the global south?" It was a question Lizzie hadn't really given much thought. She reflected that Aaron was always caring about impoverished and disadvantaged people. This was not a trait Lizzie shared, but looking at it objectively, she decided that it was a good form of kindness. She appreciated kindness in John, so she should give Aaron some credit as well. Outside of her mind, Francesca paused for only a moment before answering. Her response was smooth, but it lacked the practiced air of her speech. Any large corporation is going to have a global impact, of course, and we'll see it especially in the rainforests and mineral-rich countries. Needless to say, those relationships will be exploitative. But I think we should be most suspicious of the actions that usually seem most benevolent. Specifically, the ostensibly altruistic donations of drugs to various countries for free or produced at cost. For example, I have long believed that SAS Inc. is I'm going to go SAS. SAS Inc. is distributing insufficiently tested drugs and effectively using the supposed beneficiaries of their donations as test subjects. But there can be serious concerns even for well-intentioned attempts, such as the mental stimulants Meniger AG donated in sub-Saharan Africa. They had a positive impact on test scores, yes, but those drugs have serious long-term side effects when not taken according to a rigid schedule. Given the reality of the situation, both financial and personal, many recipients simply won't follow or even have a chance to follow the proper course. We'll be seeing the consequences of that for years. A decent question, if not one that held particular interest for her. Lizzie listened to a few more bad questions before she sensed a general movement in John's body and realized he was getting out to ask a question of his own. She nodded to him and let go of his hand. "What are you going to ask, John?" Something that will really put her on the spot, I assume? She listened in irritation as other people asked questions, but finally it was his turn. He cleared his throat nervously, but wasn't so uncomfortable as he might have been before. "For those of us who want to have a career in this field, where do you think we can make the most difference? What balance do you see between regulating from the outside and trying to change organizations from within?" Not a bad question, though Lizzie found herself wondering just how much it mirrored his thought process. He had discussed his thoughts about the future with her, of course, but there was something different about hearing him state them out loud in front of so many people. A good question, but a difficult one. I'd like to believe that the best answer is the FDCA or other regulatory body, but I'm not sure I'd recommend someone who hasn't started their career go that direction. We'll see what happens with our lobbying over the next few years. As for reforming from within, I'm tempted to say that's impossible. Look at SoftSynth. It carried the Japanese economy for a time, but now internal conflict is threatening long-term deflation. In my mind, the biggest threat is that corporations will lack meaningful competition and make it effectively impossible for anyone to regulate them. So honestly, what we might need more than anyone is business majors. Well, that makes sense to me. That got a laugh from the audience, but it struck Lizzie as a serious answer. John pondered it as well, his eyes contemplative as he returned to sit beside her. Lizzie was dying to know his thoughts, but for now she just smiled as he sat down beside her. None of the questions after that were particularly notable. Lizzie began to get nervous as their time ran out, since if something bad were to happen, it would likely happen toward the end. Yet it ended without incident, as had every anxious situation in the years since the battle of Koitek operatives, but she was only slowly beginning to relax. If all those events had gone smoothly, Maybe their wedding would as well. And if that was true, then what were they waiting for? Lizzie gazed toward John as they headed out, pondering the thought. But there were so many things they were dealing with, so many considerations, so many thoughts. And it was wonderful just being with him. There was no need to rush. Setting the matter aside, Lizzie happily just discussed the speech with John as they headed home. There would be discussion groups, but the only person she wanted in her group was him. They talked late into the night and happily fell asleep, still in their clothes. In the middle of a boring psychology class, Lizzie partially listened to the lecture while she worked on her notebook. She was drawing lots of pictures of John now, and getting a little better at it. Sometimes her focus drifted, though, and she found herself writing his name over and over again. Now that the event was past, most of her immediate fears had been put to rest, at least temporarily. If Koitek wasn't likely to be tracking them, then she had more options. Maybe they could get married after all. If so, she was disappointed that she made them wait so long. But how to get to that point? Though she didn't worry about making John afraid of her, she didn't want to add any stress to his life by seeming too insistent. And yet it had to be perfect. Their wedding would be another treasured memory of their lives together that she wanted to carry around with her forever. A small part of her did worry that he was putting it off for some reason of his own. She couldn't doubt, that he was fully committed to her. But there was a difference between living together and actually getting married. The professor said something that drew some of her attention away from what really mattered. That list sounded like it would be on the exam, and he did like to include things that were lecture only to catch sleeping students. Lizzie quickly scribbled it down to memorize later, irritated at the distraction. Well, this is a bad time to really be pondering things. I mean, you are in study hall. Just saying. The only reason she was even in the class was that she needed the credit to graduate. At first, Lizzie had actually been interested, wondering if she could learn anything about depression that would help her be a bit better partner to John. But mostly, the class was just useless. Everything was focused on specific patterns of thought and declaring them to be unnatural, when they didn't seem any stranger than the way most people thought. At least not to her. You are the one person in the entire world that is probably the least qualified to be be able to judge and determine you shouldn't be able to judge why can't I freaking speak? You are the most unnatural person on the planet when it comes to your thinking process. Therefore, you are the least qualified to be thinking about what is natural for other people. Because I really don't think you are even capable of fully understanding what natural is, even at this point in your life. There, that's all I was saying. That's all I was trying to say, more or less. Why was that so damn difficult? At least not to her. Trying to engage with it mentally just irritated her. And what they said about depression just made her angry. They talked about depression like it was a simple problem that would soon be cured. The professor was even a fan of Koitek. Lizzie was certain that if he had his way, they'd take away her John and replace him with a different person. Without realizing it, her writing in the notebook had become sketchy and angry. Lizzie refocused and tried to draw him again. The way he looked when he came through sadness, and showed her that quiet happiness deep within his eyes. When the lecture ended, Lizzie wasn't quite there, so she bit her lip and tried to finish quickly. No one usually paid her any mind, she could finish and leave herself in a good place with... Holy shit. Somebody saw your notebook. Lizzie reacted instantly at the voice over her shoulder, slamming her notebook closed with one hand and reaching down for her axe with the other. She restrained herself from acting, excuse me, instead focusing up on the girl beside her. Although, to be fair, you might as well stop yourself from axing somebody, you know? That's some serial killer shit right there. I really gotta ask, why do all the girls look the same? I don't think my personal drawings are any of your business. It's everybody's problem if you're stalking some random guy. You know, I do agree with you, but you really don't know who the fuck you're dealing with. Please, shut up. Lizzie forced herself to smile, not to mess anything up for him. Her body trembled just slightly as she put her notebook away and rose to her feet calmly. This isn't some random guy. It's my boyfriend. And does he know you keep a stalker journal? No, but that was beside the point. She didn't understand. Didn't understand at all. She was insulting their relationship. Lizzie evaluated her quickly. No physical threat. No capability to put up any resistance. Do I have to? Do I absolutely have to? Oh, they even change a little bit when I highlight them. Well, I got one here that... Don't kill her yet. Taking a deep breath, Lizzie maintained control for John's sake and answered calmly. I don't think it's your place to meddle with our relationship. Yeah, no. This is just like what we were talking about last week. Either he doesn't know and you're creepy as hell, or he does and you have some kind of weird codependent relationship. If you can't see you need help, you need someone to help you. You need someone to help you. You shouldn't say things like that. Look, I'm just applying what we're learning. John is a kind person. He wouldn't judge me like you do. Then he's just enabling your condition. Again, I agree with you, but seriously, for your own safety, zip it! Lizzie took a deep breath and took a moment to think. Slit her throat immediately, remove her fingers and feed them to her. Befriend her until an opportunity for extensive torture. We even have an option to do a cold revenge option. End the conversation quickly, and acquire napalm. Bury her alive. End the conversation, tell John all about it. Strangle her with her own intestines, remove her cleanly, and dispose the body. I highly doubt that all these choices are going to actually play out exactly as they say. It's going to probably just be like literally only two choices here. Like she just kills you in some generic way, and then I just have the option to just simply, well, yeah, not end it. So let's just end the conversation quickly. Only her promises to him prevented Lizzie from doing what she wanted to do. But if I was going to choose anything, though, I would have wanted to see what would happen if you got the napalm. That sounds bad. And so she gave the other girl a smile. The professor also said that analysis should only be done by professionals. Are you a certified professional? The response was nothing special. Only the best that Lizzie could manage while under such stress. Yet the other girl took a step back, suddenly uncertain. Look, I was just making an observation, okay? Perhaps you could make such observations about your own relationship. A moment later, the girl fled with remarkable speed. Lizzie suppressed her urge to give chase. You got lucky, you got lucky, lady. That's all I'll say. You got fucking lucky. That had not been entirely wise of her, but she didn't care about that right now. Her world was still hollow, and she slowly became aware that she was gripping the handle of her axe so tightly that it hurt. Though her mind still knew exactly what it wanted to do, Lizzie remembered John and set those thoughts aside. Refocused, Lizzie carefully loosened her grip, then headed home at the highest speed that wouldn't draw attention. When she arrived, she threw herself into John's arms and held him tightly. He looked concerned, but when she just clung to him, he understood and simply embraced her. That bitch was wrong. She was the problem, not Lizzie. Definitely not John. He was holding her and stroking her so gently, helping her return to a better place. Being in his arms always calmed her, and soon Lizzie was closer to what others would consider normal. Emphasis on the word closer. She did like being this way, happy and peaceful, and she could do more for John like this. It was an unintended side effect, and it stopped her from slaughtering anyone. She stayed in his arms for a while after that, setting aside her guilt for causing him stress, and just indulging in his kindness for a while. The girl had been right about one thing. A normal boy could never have been with her. No fucking kidding. John was special. Oh yeah. That was why they were so wonderful together. Even as she regained her full calm. How did I get charm out of that? However, one thing didn't change in her mind. Maybe it wasn't possible due to the circumstances, but it would have been better to kill the girl. Why? I fail to see how. After the incident, Lizzie spent a while sorting through her remaining thoughts. She had completely filled up one notebook, so she started a second and took it with her to boring classes. Math wasn't boring, speak for yourself, but she did find herself running her fingers over the edge of the notebook as she worked. Later. For now, she would finish the requirement. Lizzie didn't mind math. It was straightforward, free of judgments. Though she didn't understand her professor's talk about its elegance and beauty, it didn't seem incomprehensible to her. It was all right for a non-John person. He was all right for a non-John person. After class, she floated around campus to return home. That annoying couple tried to engage her in conversation again, but she was able to make polite small talk without committing to anything, keeping on her way without wasting too much time. Then she arrived home, found John looking at her notebook. Are you regretting your life choices yet, John? Even a little? I certainly would. Her focus condensed down to a single point flickering over everything. His posture, his eyes, the exact set of his mouth, the speed at which he looked up toward her. Such a thing would have been terrifying. It still made her scared that she might have gone too far this time, add doubt to his mind and ruin their relationship. And he did have a concerned look on his face, so there would be no simple, easy solution. Lizzie, are these things you felt that you couldn't tell me? What? No, not at all. Okay, I do believe you. Have you been keeping notebooks like these as long as we've been together? She squirmed a little at that, her desire to smooth things over and make him happy warring with her desire to be completely honest with him. I had these books a long time ago, but no. I only started again recently. That's the only one. Other than the new one I just started. Did something happen to make you more stressed? Is it something I've done? There was real pain in his eyes, and Lizzie hated herself for a brief moment. She caused him more pain, just as if she'd sworn to herself that she never would do again. But her John never rushed to judgment, and he was strong, even if he was often sad, and she longed to protect him. The relationship had been through more intense things. This wouldn't be the end. Lizzie carefully sat down opposite him. It definitely isn't anything you did, John. And it isn't anything specific. I've just been a little anxious lately. Yeah, a little. I was worried the speech might be more of a problem. I can understand that. He kept leafing through the notebook, leaving Lizzie to squirm uncomfortably. It represented her true thoughts, but some of them felt a little awkward under his gaze. And she couldn't tell what he was thinking. The fact ate her up inside until she couldn't hold it back anymore. You don't hate me, right? Nothing in the notebook scares you? John looked up at her in astonishment. A moment later, he moved forward to embrace her. And though that was wonderful, it was his honest surprise at her question that meant the most. She had just been paranoid. There had been no need to fear. Oh, Lizzie. Of course I wouldn't hate you. I'm just sad that you were stressed and felt like you couldn't tell me. He wrapped an arm around her and pulled her so they sat side by side, then pulled a notebook into his lap. When I read these, I mostly just see you. This is who you are, and I can feel your love for me on every page. Yeah, your obsessive, psychotic, murderous love. Turning the page to one of her drawings of killing Smith, his lips twitched a bit of a smile. These are, I don't know, cute. Cute. You two really are meant for each other. Good God. I've seen you murderous, Lizzie, but this is different. Playful. If this helps you erase your feelings, I think it's healthy. Oh, John. I should have known you would understand. I'm not perfect, but I'm always here and I want to understand you. Which is why I have to ask. Is it really nothing? Is there a reason you've been more stressed lately? Lizzie sighed and leaned against his chest, considering. It was a difficult question, not just because she had to think about what the best answer would be, but also because she wasn't entirely certain herself. In her mind, her thoughts all flowed together. Speaking of him made them feel clearer, but it wasn't always easy. Reassuring him that it wasn't his fault would shift some of the burden off of him. But asking him to help would certainly make things more stressful for John. The thing is, I don't really know exactly for sure what's going on through his head, and what exactly is affecting him and to what extent. So it could be risky for me to ask him to help with Lizzie's stressors. But I feel like I should ask. John, there are a lot of things that make me really anxious. I'm sometimes afraid to tell you about them. Really? You feel that way? It isn't all just idle fears, John. I don't like seeing you near other girls, even if nothing is going on. Even if they're married and lesbians and you would never do anything. I don't like it. Okay. I'll stay out of situations that make you uncomfortable as much as possible. Just tell me when you're uncomfortable, okay? Okay, John. On second thought, maybe it was a mistake for me to choose this, because this is just going to exert more unnecessary control over John's life. Well, more control than being in a relationship with a yandere would entail anyway, but whatever. I don't want to get meta right this minute. She eagerly leaned into his embrace, filled with warmth. Maybe it would be easier this way. She had held back many thoughts, but he had just given her permission to share them. Now she could keep him safe more easily. But as warm as things were between them, Lizzie felt a bit of hesitance. When she looked at his face, she saw something shift and realized that there was something less pleasant. He wanted to bring it up. Had something in the notebook upset him? Her heart began hammering her chest. There is one thing we need to talk about, though. I don't like... this page, for example. Lizzie blinked in surprise as she scanned it quickly. It was a page of dense writing where she talked about him. Largely about her love for him and many other things. What could be amiss there? Do you always write pronouns for me with a capital letter? Of course, John. You're not like any other boy. You're the only person for me. I'm glad you love me, but I don't know about this. I'm not sure I'm comfortable with it. Well, if it's any consolation, John, I'm not comfortable with it either. And I'm also a bit irritated with it, with how many times it's tripped me up a bit, trying to read things out. What? Why not? She stared at him, hiding the true dismay from her face. Inside, she was panicking. Usually, John was so calm and steady. She loved understanding more about him. When she actually felt confused, it always terrified her. Forced her to wonder if she was somehow drifting away from him forever. I know how intensely you feel things, but this just feels like a little much. She's murdered people by the dozens, kidnapped you, held her in her basement at one point, burned down a fucking tree to impress you, and a whole host of other behaviors that would make any sane person run for their fucking lives towards the nearest bunker. But capitalizing pronouns for you capitalizing pronouns towards you is a little bit much. That's what makes you uncomfortable. Well, then again, I guess I really shouldn't be getting on his case this much about it at this point, because it's not like we're dealing with the events of the first game here. He's long since chosen this insane humanoid for quite a while, you know? But, honestly, though, compared to I guess what I'm trying to say is, compared to literally everything else that she's done in the past here, I think that this is probably one of the more tame things she could do, in all due honesty. I want you to be my partner, Lizzie. I don't want you to worship me. What do you think she has been doing since you both met? Are you unobservant or something? But John deserves it. You're wonderful, and I love you with my whole heart. I know that. But since I love you too, I have to be honest with you. This worries me a little bit. This capitalized version of me. Is that really me? I'm almost afraid all of this is for someone else that represents me, but isn't me in truth. Well, to be fair, she's been kind of in love with an idea of you since the very beginning, you know? You just basically shaped yourself into that ideal thing for her. No, it isn't like that at all. She clutched him to her, his head against her chest, while she gripped one hand in his hair. But through her dismay, she began to understand. The thought upset her a little, and the idea that she might be worshipping some false form of him was terrifying. But she could understand it. John was still her John. If I just refer to you like any other boy, it doesn't feel right. Like I'm saying they're the same as you. I would never betray you like that, John. Lizzie, I think I can understand that, a little. But can you understand me too? I do, John, I do. She stopped gripping him, so tightly and let him pull back slightly. They stared into each other's eyes for a while and both smiled. Nothing had been said changed their love for each other that had been said, and they both knew it. Lizzie leaned forward to kiss him gently. John was being too humble, but she wouldn't argue over that with him. She understood why he was upset, and he didn't mean to suggest anything like that. Certainly not to him, and now she needed to avoid suggesting it to herself. Maybe she could accomplish the same thing another way. It was only her fear that she was betraying him that made her think that way. If she had no fear, if she loved him even more utterly and totally than she ever had before, as if you need to do more than that, good God, then it wouldn't matter if she capitalized a word or not. Though she wasn't there yet, Lizzie felt peaceful enough to quiet her thoughts and just enjoy kissing him for a while. And kissing him. When they finished, John pulled back and smiled gently at her. Well, this has been quite a conversation. If you want to take a break, I'd understand. But if you want to keep talking, I'm here for you. All I want for you is to hold me a little longer, okay? Of course. He held her like that for a long time. Even afterward, when they got their textbooks and began reading, he stayed close, letting her rest against him so they were always touching. By the time they were ready to go to bed, Lizzie no longer felt nervous about him discovering her notebooks. But she also had a feeling that she wouldn't need them anymore. Well, that's good, I guess. Life improved after their conversation. Lizzie overflowed with so much positive energy that she was constantly visiting John for extra kisses and showering affection over him. His reaction was more subtle, but she could feel that it had made a difference to him. Though Lizzie wrote in her notebook occasionally, she didn't take it with her anymore and didn't feel too much need for it. In fact, when Aaron invited them to a party with his friends, Lizzie felt so free of stress that she didn't mind them going. John had gone home for a while ago, after making a few social rounds. She thought he was actually glad to leave, since parties like this weren't his sort of thing. Even if they had lots of people he liked under other circumstances, they had other people. Part of her had wanted to go home with him as soon as he had left, but he noticed she was busy with another conversation and said she could catch up later. At the moment, she was talking to a girl named Rose, who looks a lot like all the other girls we've seen so far. Are you sure that we're not in a cloning factory rather than a college? She was always hanging out with Aaron, and they acted as if they might be dating. Though Lizzie also had a strong intuition that wasn't quite the case. It didn't matter to her, so she didn't pursue it. What mattered was that Rose showed no interest in John, and she didn't like how judgmental their psychology class was either. No alcohol at all, huh? Not judging. I was wondering if it was a personal commitment or something. Lizzie was drinking water from her cup. Though she hadn't thought about it, she knew the exact reason. Becoming intoxicated reduced her ability to enjoy John's presence and slightly decreased her combat potential, thus was to be avoided at all costs. It's just not to my taste. That's cool. Honestly, some drinks taste so shitty I wonder if people really like it, or if society just convinces everyone they need to like it because it's refined or whatever. I hadn't thought about that before. Society convinces us of all kinds of things. Like, who decided weddings should be these obscenely elaborate performances? And wearing white is just a vestige of an absurd older custom. I was hoping to wear white for our wedding. Normally, Lizzie would have followed the tone of the conversation and not offered any contradiction, since that would just lead to annoyances. One reason Rose was acceptable was that she didn't get offended when people disagreed with her, which meant Lizzie didn't have to waste energy on such things. It's 100% fine if that's what you want. I just think some people only stumble into it because that's what society expects. But you're the last person I expect to be that way, Lizzie. Really? Yeah, it's pretty obvious you don't care about what other people think. I admire that. Oh, thank you. Oh, you have no idea. She's very selective about who she thinks about her. But trust me, she does care. When she cares a lot. Lizzie gave her a smile that wasn't faked. One of the few real smiles she'd given to anyone other than him. In the old days, it would never have happened. But being together with John was so wonderful, she felt like she had an excess of happiness. Enough to share with people who were acceptable company when he wasn't there even. Their conversation didn't continue long after that. Though, because several of Rose's other friends showed up, she didn't try to press Lizzie to join them, so Lizzie was soon alone again. That was fine with her, though she immediately began to consider her exit route. Best to go home to him. But before she could finish, someone else ambled up beside her. Enjoying yourself, Lizzie? Sure. Thanks for inviting us. No problem. I'm glad to hear it. You two are hard to read. Yeah, they kind of have to be. Really? Well, you seem to understand each other on a deeper level. Oh, you must mean Rose. Never mind. I thought you were talking about, John and Lizzie. Well, you seem to understand each other on a deeper level. And it's nice to see, honestly. I wish I had a relationship that close. Of course, I don't have one at all right now. Oh. I had thought you and Rose... Aaron stopped for a full second, giving her a bizarre expression. He narrowed his eyes as if uncertain if she was being serious. Lizzie, do you really not know I'm gay? And he had been laughing and talking with John earlier. Oh shit, you're gay. Which means you would be interested in John, in her mind, and you... Yeah, oh boy, this is not good. And she remembered that he had slapped John on the back. Had his hands lingered too long? And not only was he single, but he had just said that thing about wanting a relationship like theirs. Nice pose. No, I hadn't noticed. That's put on some massive pecs and double the size of all the muscles throughout your arms. You could have a JoJo's Bizarre Adventure pose right there. Oh, you need a very flamboyant outfit too, probably with giant chains, preferably golden. Maybe a few hearts here and there. Huh, you have that look in your eyes. Damn, Lizzie, if you were anyone else, I'd almost be offended. Oh, I'm just upset I didn't notice. I'm sorry, his pose is making me laugh. Help you find a man you love and you two get married. Okay. I'm not trying to have a chip on my shoulder. It's just, you know, the Midwest is a pretty conservative place. I mean it, though. It took a supreme effort of will for Lizzie to finish the conversation without giving the wrong impression. Such a thing would have been impossible for her, as she was 3 years ago. But thanks to John, she could do a better job of looking outside herself. Though it couldn't touch anything within her, she could intellectually understand what Aaron was saying to her. People disapproving of him was very similar to people who might disapprove of her, so her reaction didn't need to be faked. Though he was sharper than most, she didn't think Aaron sensed any of the turmoil inside her. Fare thee well, Aaron. Maybe you could go pose at somebody else for a while. When he finally left, though, she was relieved. How had she missed something so important? Maybe Aaron was a good person, but most weren't. Lizzie had thought she could focus on nothing but her relationship with John. Yet now she realized that her focus had given her blind spots. There were other consequences, too. Lizzie presumed that John knew and was paying more attention to such things. She had been acting so close to Rose earlier in the party. Had some part of him seen it and worried she might be interested in anyone other than him? No, there's no way, no. She didn't fear that John would feel jealous, but that wasn't his nature. But he might find some way to doubt his self-worth. Maybe wondering if he wasn't enough for her, or something else equally absurd. At his best, he would understand that it was false. But if he was depressed... Lizzie realized that instead of taking a drink, she was chewing on the rim of her cup hard enough that she tasted plastic. Better than her finger, since she was in public, but still a sign that she needed to pull back and reconsider. I think I'm going to go ahead and cut things off here. We can deal with Lizzie's ever-growing stress levels, and, well, I guess the fact that in her mind she now has competition in the form of Aaron in the next episode. Aaron, you poor bastard. Even if you don't have any kind of feelings for John at all, I feel bad for you just for the mere fact that you are now officially a possible threat to Lizzie. Because God help you if you do anything to set her off. Because divine intervention would be the only thing that would probably save you by that point. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this latest episode of Crimson Gray, Dusk and Dawn. If you did and you want to see more content from me, feel free to subscribe to my channel. I will see you all next time. Take care.